Hi everyone, Carl Brundage here. Let's take a look at how we can add subtotals and grand totals to a pivot table inside of Einstein Analytics. So I've built a basic pivot table. It actually looks kind of like an income statement where I have a couple of different groupings, a summary, a category, the name, as well as the period. What I'd like to do is I'd actually like to get totals in here so I could see the total for the revenues, the total for the overall revenues, and then the grand total at the bottom. Something like this is the end result. We can see a total for total revenues, operating expenses, and then the grand total. So let's take a look at how we can build this table into the next. The first thing we'll do is switch to SACL mode and take a look at the statement that's been generated. So here's our standard statement. It's going through, it's loading up our data set, it's filtering, then it's starting to do some groupings, ordering the data, and then limiting the results. So what we're going to do is we're going to piggyback off of what's here. We're going to make a few changes. We're going to need to return the same columns because at the end we're going to union these all together. So let's start and work with our first set of subtotals. So I'm going to just take the statement that was there before and I'm going to alias it. And I'm going to make it an S for subtotals. What we want to do, instead of grouping by all these different categories, we want to take out the one that no longer applies. So in this case, I'm going to keep the period and year because I like that pivot table option. Instead, I'm going to get rid of code name. We don't want to see individual values. Instead, we want to see totals. So I'll remove that from my grouping, and then I'll come down to my statement and find where I had code name. And instead of putting an actual value there, I'm just going to put in the word total. And let's put it in all uppercase just to make it a little easier to see. Now, so I have two streams. I have this S stream and a Q stream. The one thing we need to do is we actually need to put these together. So we'll say Q equals union Q and S. Now the good news is we already have an order by statement. So if we run this query, what we'll start seeing is down here we have a total. So for partnership expenses, for principal, really for all the different sections. So if we come down here, there's the total. Now let's just jump back to the pivot table because it's a little bit easier to see there. So that's our first set of totals for code name. All we have to do is really repeat this process a couple more times. So instead of subtotals this time, I'm going to go for another grouping. So I'm going to make it my G instead of S. And in this case, we don't want this group 4 in here. We just want to see it by the period and the year. So we'll take that out. We'll change group 4 to say total. And we'll add it down here. Run this, pop back to our pivot table. And you can see now we have the next total. So the only thing we have to do, we can see the total for income, operating expenses. We just need to get that grand total all the way down at the bottom. So as you can guess, we're going to take this, do it one more time. We're going to make this RT for total. We only want to do it by the period, year, and month. Remove it. Add the word total. Don't forget to union it. Run that query and switch back to the pivot table. And now you can see with a few easy steps, we definitely have had subtotals and grand totals. It's really starting to look like an actual income statement. Now a couple of things to be aware of. Once you switch to SACL, you're going to have your items locked over here, so we can't switch to a different measure. The filters aren't going to show, even though you have the dates on there. So what you may want to do is you may actually want to put this on a dashboard. So here's an example dashboard where I've put a date range filter on and removed the filter by the date on my pivot table, so that now as I change, I can actually see different months of data. Maybe we'll just go to an absolute date range. We'll look at last December to the end of this month, or the end of last month. So you can actually have the date changes without needing to go into some stats. The other thing that you want to be aware of is I had numbers in front of all of my code groupings, code summaries, so the totals very easily fell to the bottom from an alphabetical sort perspective. You may have to play around with some special characters if you're trying to put totals into different text. This has been Carl Brundage. If you have any questions, please feel free to connect with me, and happy analytics.